We treat our minds like software that needs a factory reset. It's a seductive thought, isn't it? The idea that there is a pure version of you buried somewhere under all the accumulated data. We feel sluggish, distracted, and heavy with 1,000 things we never actually needed to know, like we're carrying the weight of the entire internet in our pockets. We see the world in high-definition noise, and we start to crave the quiet like it's a physical medicine, a prescription for a soul we're not sure we still have. So, we look for the most extreme exit we can find, the kind of solution that sounds like a dare or a high-performance biohack. We look for the white wall, and we decide that 24 hours of staring at nothing is the only way to reset our happiness back to its factory settings. It sounds logical, in that strange, cold way that modern self-improvement always does, turning a basic human experience into a tactical operation. The premise is that if you deprive the brain of everything, every screen, every book, every conversation, surely the next little thing will feel like a miracle. I know you're probably nodding right now. We've all felt the desperate need to just hit delete on the overwhelming hum of our own lives. We've been told that boredom is the missing ingredient, the secret sauce that will finally make us appreciate the real world again. And so, we walk into a room with a single chair and a flat, unmoving surface of white paint, ready to conquer the nothingness. It feels strangely comfortable at first, the novelty of having absolutely no tasks, no deadlines, and no expectations for an entire day. There is a certain drug-like high that comes with knowing exactly what you are doing at 10:15 a.m. You are looking at a wall. You aren't a worker, or a parent, or a consumer. For this brief moment, you are just an observer of a very still piece of drywall. You feel like a monkey in a digital age, like you've cracked a secret code that everyone else is still struggling to understand in their chaotic lives. In the first hour, you think, I could do this forever, and you feel a smug sense of peace that you're finally optimizing your internal hardware. You feel superior to the people you can hear outside through the window, the ones who are still living their messy, distracted, unreset lives. But then, the clock starts to slow down, not just a little bit, but in a way that feels like the gears of time are being filled with wet sand. The white wall isn't just a wall anymore. It becomes a mirror that won't let you look away, reflecting every thought you've tried to ignore. And the reflection it shows you isn't the Zen person you thought you were. It is the person who is terrified of what happens when there is nothing left to do. You start to notice things you never would have seen before, tiny imperfections in the paint that start to feel like major architectural flaws. A small, dead crack near the corner starts to look like a mountain range on a map of a country that hasn't been discovered yet. I found myself giving names to the dust motes floating in the afternoon sun, watching them dance in the silence like they were part of a tiny ballet. This is the part that feels strangely comfortable, the realization that your brain is an entertainment machine that refuses to ever truly shut off. If the world won't give it a story, it will invent one out of a speck of dust, a shadow, and the way the light hits a plaster seam. But as the sun sets and the room grows dim, the entertainment starts to lose its charm. The silence starts to feel like a physical weight. You realize that you haven't actually stopped the noise at all. You've just moved it from the screen to the inside of your own skull. The internal monologue becomes a shouting match, and it is louder than any podcast or playlist you've ever used to drown it out in the past. I started to notice a weird contradiction in the logic of this reset, a flaw in the way we think about our own well-being. We use boredom as a tool to become more efficient, which is a bit like using sleep as a way to become a better, faster coffee drinker. We treat our peace as a recovery cycle for our productivity, instead of just letting peace be the goal in and of itself. I know if you're still listening, Something here probably landed, because we've turned even our stillness into a job with a performance review. By hour 12, the humor started to turn a bit dry, and I realized I was competing with the wall, trying to be the best at staring. I wanted to win the award for the most disciplined boredom, to prove that my mind was stronger than the empty space in front of me. It's ironic, isn't it? Even in a room with nothing, we find a way to make the experience about achievement and self-validation. The pressure isn't a weight from the outside. It's a hum from the inside, a constant, low-frequency vibration of what is happening next. The wall doesn't have an answer to that question. It doesn't even acknowledge that you're asking it, which is the most frustrating part of all. I caught myself reviewing every awkward thing I've said in public since the 3rd grade, a mental highlight reel of everything. The brain, when left completely alone, is an excellent archaeologist of personal shame, digging up things you thought were long gone. It holds these artifacts up to the white light of the wall and asks you why you haven't fixed them yet, even though you have no tools. And you realize that the reason you stay so busy is because you don't want to see the things the archaeologist is finding in the dirt. We think we're bored because we have nothing to do, but maybe we're just afraid because we have nothing to hide behind in this empty room. Round hour 16, the hallucinations started, not the fun, colorful kind, but the desperate kind where the wall seems to move. The white paint seemed to pulse with a heartbeat, and the shadows in the corners started to look like they were creeping toward my chair. I realized I wasn't healing in any traditional sense. I was just sensory depriving myself into a state of quiet, high-functioning panic. But I stayed in the chair because I wanted the results I was promised by the people who say this is how you find true happiness. I wanted the happiness peak that was supposed to happen once I finally let myself be bored enough to appreciate a blade of grass. But happiness isn't a level on a gauge that you can just refill by draining the tank first and starting from the bottom of the barrel. It is more like a bird that only lands when you aren't looking for it with a net and a stopwatch and a checklist of reset symptoms. I started to wonder if the 24-hour stare wasn't a reset at all, but just another form of consumption disguised as its opposite. We consume the void hoping it will digest the chaos, but the void doesn't have a stomach or a plan for our future productivity. It's just empty. And being empty isn't the same thing as being clean or being new. It's just a lack of things to look at. I know you're probably nodding right now, because we've all tried to fix our lives by doing something extreme and slightly ridiculous. We think if a technique is hard or uncomfortable, it must be working, and if it's painful, it must be valuable for our personal growth. But maybe the wall is just a wall, and we're just people who are very, very tired and looking for an excuse to sit still for a while. I noticed that I was already planning my post-wall life with an intensity that bordered on the obsessive, writing mental lists of tasks. I was going to be so productive, and I was going to eat so well, and I was going to be the most reset person anyone had ever met. I was using my nothing time to build a brand new prison from my everything time, and I didn't even see the irony of it. The irony of it all is that the wall is the only thing that doesn't want something from you, but we can't stand that kind of relationship. We have to give it a purpose, a function, a reason to exist in our schedule. Otherwise, the silence feels like a waste of our potential. By the final hour, the desperation had faded away, replaced by a strange, hollow kind of resignation that felt a bit like defeat. I wasn't reset, and I didn't feel like my happiness was about to skyrocket. I just felt exhausted by the effort of trying to be still. I realized that the hell isn't the boredom itself, but the constant, nagging need to be better even when you're doing nothing at all. The clock finally hit the 24-hour mark, and I stood up with a groan because my legs were stiff and my back was screaming at me. The world outside the room felt like a physical assault. The colors were too bright, and the sounds of the street were much too sharp. For a few minutes, yes, an apple tasted like the best thing I'd ever eaten, and a glass of cold water felt like a religious experience. But the effect wore off before the sun had even gone down, and the peak was just a temporary spike on a graph that quickly returned to normal. The world rushed back in with all its demands and its noise, and within 2 hours, I was back to checking my phone for notifications. The factory reset didn't change the hardware or the operating system. It just cleared the cache for a moment so I could feel the room. I think we like these extreme techniques because they give us a story to tell ourselves about how hard we're working on our happiness. I stared at a wall for 24 hours to find myself sounds much better than I sat in a room because I forgot how to exist. We turn our stillness into a performance, a feat of endurance that we can use to justify our existence to ourselves and everyone else. I catch myself looking at the wall in my office sometimes now, not for 24 hours, but just for a fleeting second in between tasks. And I feel that strange, familiar to do it again, to go back to the hell just so I can feel the heaven of finally leaving it. It's a cycle, a habit of seeking the extreme to fix the mundane, like a soldier who can't stop looking for exits even when they're safe at home. If this sounds familiar, you can leave a like, or you can just sit there and look at your screen for a while without clicking anything. Feel free to comment. I'm genuinely curious how you see it. Is boredom a tool we can use, or is it just the uncomfortable truth of being alive? We think we're reset, but we're just different for a little while, until the world catches up with us and fills the silence back in. And then the dust motes come back, and the cracks in the plaster don't look like mountains anymore. They just look like old, broken paint. The wall is the only thing that doesn't want something from you, but we still find a way to take something from it anyway. We treat our minds like software that needs a factory reset, but maybe the problem is that we aren't software at all. Maybe we're just the hardware, and the hardware is supposed to be a little bit noisy and a little bit cluttered after a few years of use. Maybe the white wall isn't a cure for the noise of the world. Maybe it's just a place to wait until the world starts moving again. I don't think I found my peak happiness in that room, but I did find out how much I hate being alone with someone I don't really know. And that person, unfortunately, was me, and he was much more complicated and much more annoyed than the Zen version I'd imagined. But at least now I know where he lives. He lives right behind the noise, waiting for the wall to give him something to do. I keep thinking back to the opening thought, about how we want to hit that reset button and start over with a clean, empty slate. Maybe the button doesn't exist, and maybe there is no pure version of us to find under all the data and the memories and the stress. Maybe we are just the sum of all the noise we've ever heard, and the silence isn't a reset. It's just a different kind of sound. And if you take away the noise, there isn't a better you waiting in the wings. There's just a blank space where a person used to be. A blank space is a very hard place to live for 24 hours, even if you're convinced it's going to make you feel like a god later. The clock is still ticking, of course. It doesn't stop just because we decide to watch it or because we decide to ignore it for a day. But maybe, just for a moment, we can stop trying to make it move faster by staring it down until it blinks. The wall is still white, and the paint is still dry, and I am still here. And none of us have changed nearly as much as I thought we would. Thank you for listening. See you in the next episode.